this is what happens when you have a week to pull this together. But we're very excited and happy to have you all here today. I love that we were able to pull together such a wonderful in-person audience as well as online. Thank you to everyone who's watching this live, those who are going to be watching the recording. Welcome to today's event, Greenland and the Future of NATO, the future of the Transatlantic Alliance, officially. We are honored to have both Senator Shaheen and former ambassador to Denmark from 98 to 2001, Ambassador Swett. We are really excited for this important and timely conversation. For those who are not yet aware, my name is Tim Horgan, and I am the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, which means we do not take any stances on policies, politics, parties, or politicians. That is for you to decide. We are here as your platform for global conversations. We want you to think about the world. We don't care what you think. We just care that it's informed. We are also a community-supported organization, so thank you to all of our members, donors, supporters, sponsors, etc., who make this work possible. Without your critical funds, we would not be here. These kind of conversations, while they take a lot of staff time, and staff is important, it is so critically important that we have a strong community backing us up, not only to give us the money to make this happen, but also to be here in the room with us, to be a part of the conversation, because if we're just talking to the wall, we're not really accomplishing anything. So thank you so much for investing your time, investing your insights, and bringing your questions to today's event. Now, I want to maximize our time with our wonderful speakers here, so I'm going to quickly do introductions. You all, I'm sure, know Senator Shaheen's long background in politics and here in the state. Most importantly for today's discussion, she is the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I always have to check myself on that one. And she is recently back from Denmark itself in light of what's been going on to speak with leaders over there and talk about where the U.S. stands. Ambassador Swett, as I said, former ambassador to Denmark from 98 to 2001. Previously, before that, in Congress for New Hampshire. I remember back in the day being in 4th grade and seeing his campaign signs out there, just to date it a little bit for you. But I don't think we can have two better people here in the state of New Hampshire to talk about this critical issue. So, Senator Shaheen, I want to turn to you first and just gain your insights on what your trip to Denmark looked like, what people are talking about, and what the concerns are.
2 weeks ago now, this weekend, I joined a bipartisan, bicameral congressional delegation to Denmark. We met with Denmark and Greenlandic officials, both the Prime Minister of Denmark and Greenland, as well as parliamentarians from both countries. We met with some members of the business community. I also spoke at the University of Copenhagen and had the opportunity to talk to a lot of students there. And I came away from that probably as distressed as I have been by any trip that I have taken as a senator, because of what I heard from the people of Denmark and Greenland that we spoke to. What they said to us, and this is a country, Dick can really confirm this, but Denmark was one of the first countries to recognize the United States when we became a country in 1792. They have fought with us through both world wars. They lost on a per capita basis as many people in Afghanistan as we lost from the United States, fighting with us, the only time Article 5 of NATO has been invoked after the United States was attacked on 9/11. One of the things we did was to lay a memorial to lay a wreath at the memorial where they recognize all of the Danish soldiers killed in deployment since World War II, and it was everywhere that America has been deployed. And people said to us, we don't understand. We have been such great friends and allies. why is this happening? And it's really hard to answer that question. That was the overwhelming takeaway I had. We tried to reassure the folks we met with that people in America still have a strong relationship with Denmark, with Greenland, that we care about those countries, that we understand how important they are to the NATO alliance, Denmark. And I was relieved when the president walked back his remarks at the Davos Economic Forum and acknowledged that we were not thinking about military action in Greenland. But it's still, and I hear this from European leaders that I meet with, it undermines the trust that our allies and partners have in the United States, not just in NATO and in our traditional allies, but it also provides an opportunity for our adversaries to celebrate. Because what Vladimir Putin and President Xi of China are looking for is a break in the transatlantic alliance, a break in the relationship that we have with our allies and partners, which is one of the things that has made America so strong. So they are the ones who are celebrating over the president's remarks and this effort that has undermined the support and the relationship that we have with such strong allies.
Thank you for those insights. Ambassador Swett, I'm sure you're in touch with many people in Denmark still from your time over there. I know many of your children were living over there, but most of them are back here in New Hampshire at this point. What are you hearing from your friends and colleagues and contacts over there about what they're thinking?
Well, I'm hearing from them a lot. I think this is now on. I'm hearing from my friends a lot. Of course, this all started back in 2019 when Trump first visited the idea of purchasing Greenland. And I always keep in touch with every new coming Danish ambassador to Washington, D.C. And I have met with Jesper Sorensen, the current ambassador, about 6 months ago, concerned over this very issue. And what I told him then is what I still feel is true today, and that is that, first of all, this is a gratuitous form of bullying, and this is not the way that diplomacy should be conducted. But what it does enable the president to do is to control the news cycle. And so he has dominated the news cycles when he talks about this whole situation in Greenland. I was very relieved when he backed down in Davos and said that he wouldn't use military force and that he wasn't going to apply sanctions to Denmark and European countries. But the whole unsettledness, as was articulated by Senator Shaheen, is totally avoidable and counterproductive to the very, very good relationship that the United States has had with Denmark. As Senator Shaheen said, they're the second longest relationship and the longest unbroken ally relationship that we have had with any country in the world. And the Danes are fabulous people who stand up for what they believe, and their word is as golden as you can imagine. When they say they will do something, they do it, and they have made sacrifices for the United States in behalf of the various activities and engagements that we have worked on together. So it's very disturbing, and my concern is how do we not only rebuild that trust, but how are we going to maintain it once it is rebuilt? And that's going to take time, because trust doesn't happen overnight with big proclamations. It can be destroyed overnight with big proclamations, but it'll take many, many discussions and probably years to build it back to where it once was.
And this is something that the administration has said that they want to pursue because of national security issues, the Golden Dome, Russia and China sailing their ships all over Greenland and threatening to take over the country. Senator, in your role on the Foreign Relations Committee. I'm sure you have a lot of insights on what the reality is in this space. So stepping back from the politics of it, what does Greenland mean to our national security? And what are some of the concerns? Are they valid in terms of what the president has been saying?
Well, first of all, we got a briefing from our embassy when we were in Greenland, or when we were in Denmark, as we always do whenever we go to a country overseas. And what we heard very clearly is that there is no short-term threat to the United States, to Greenland from China and Russia. The long-term threat is in the Arctic, and that will continue. And Greenland does have an important role to play because of its geography. And we have a Space Force base, what used to be Thule. My father was actually stationed at Thule during World War II. It is now Patuxent. They've changed the name of the base. And in fact, this weekend, Senator Hassan is with a congressional delegation that includes Angus King and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, going to Greenland and visiting the base, and they will be in Nuuk meeting with officials tomorrow. So there are legitimate security reasons why it's important for us to know what's happening in Greenland and in the Arctic. We know that the fastest attack route for Russia is over the Arctic Circle to the United States. That would be the fastest. But as we pointed out when we were meeting with, or heard and then pointed out when we were meeting with officials from Denmark and Greenland, they have already said to us in multiple different ways, whatever you want to do in Greenland, we are happy to partner with you. If it's critical minerals, fine. If it's more bases, we have a treaty with Greenland that goes back to 1951, and we had until the end of the Soviet Union, we had 17 bases in Greenland. We now have one because we determined that we didn't need those other 16, and so we closed them. But they've said, whatever you need, we're there. We're happy to partner, and we're going to be a whole lot stronger if we work with them than if we try and go it on our own. So I think the good news is that there is a recognition on the part of NATO as well that we need to beef up our operations in the high north and around the Arctic Circle, because that's where threats from China and Russia are coming from, and that we're doing this together because we're stronger that way.
Just to give a little bit of context to what was just said, Greenland has actually been in the discussion between the United States and Denmark since after the Civil War in 1867, when Secretary of State Seward offered to purchase the island back then. The Danes turned down the offer, so he settled for Alaska, which I think was a pretty good settlement. We ended up did pretty well in that case. But then in 1910, we offered again to purchase. Again, we were turned down, but we then purchased the Danish West Indies, which are the U.S. Virgin Islands. So again, I think we did okay with the Danish negotiation. And then more recently, President Truman offered $100 million for the island and was turned down as well, but that resulted in the 1951 Defense of Greenland Agreement, which has in it, and you can go online, I'm sure that Tim, who is a very thorough researcher, has gone online and read the 14 articles, and it is a very open, broad, and enabling document that allows the United States and Greenland and Denmark to do almost whatever we all three can agree on to defend the island against the threats that we've been talking about. So there is a long-time relationship between the United States, Greenland, and Denmark about how we work together. But the agreements that are in place are open, broad, and inclusive enough that we could do practically anything to accomplish the kind of defense and security measures that we're concerned about. With regard to the rare earth minerals that may be existing on the island, I'm not sure. You got to go down under a lot of ice to get to them. But we also have an agreement that could be utilized and could be amended to accomplish that kind of economic interaction, and that's the U.S.-Mexico-Canadian agreement that has been formed between those three countries. We could easily write in an additional clause that would enable Greenland to be a part of that, and that would open the economic venue. So we're very much involved in working with Greenland, whether it's security or economics, on many fronts.
And just to be clear about the critical minerals, there are deposits there. Not all of them have been mapped, but the infrastructure that would be required to get them out is significant. So we're talking about a long-term investment in order to really have access to any of those critical minerals.
And just to further clarify, rare earth minerals are not actually that rare. They're just hard to process. And China does the best job processing them at this point. So
Yes.
a lot of work to be done there.
90% of
Yeah.
processing is done in China.
So where are we with this? We saw that at Davos, as you mentioned, the president stepped back from the threats of force, but there was an announcement of a framework for a strategy for a deal, or I forget the exact terminology on that. What do we know about where we stand in this relationship, where we stand in this negotiation? What insights can you provide there?
There was an agreement to continue what they called high-level talks with the Secretary of State. There's been somebody designated from the State Department to continue on the United States' behalf. There are officials designated from Denmark and Greenland to participate in those talks. I think they've had one session. My understanding was nothing much was resolved in that, and that will be ongoing, and we haven't gotten much insight into actually how that's going to work and timelines or, short-term goals or anything else.
Okay. And Ambassador, you wrote an article for Real Clear Politics, I believe it was, where you outlined that Trump's negotiating style is go for the max and then walk it back, so then everybody feels like they've gotten something and you get what you really want. Can you share your insights on where you think the president is coming from in terms of his negotiation strategy? And then I'll ask the senator to follow on as well with any insights into the implications of that form of negotiation strategy in international affairs. Very different from business to foreign affairs.
Well, and I want to make first the comment that I did not read this book before before the president was elected. But if you read his book on the art of the deal, he describes this methodology in great detail with much gusto. And I have just seen him employ what he wrote in that book time and time again, that first negotiation is always an extreme position that can be negotiated back from. So he doesn't start from the middle and stay in the middle. He starts at the extreme and works towards the middle. And I think that you can find examples of that in so many of the different negotiations that he's done. The difference is that in politics, politicians are not used to doing that. First and foremost, when you plant your foot or your position way to an extreme, it oftentimes begs credulity. And if you are pressing the truthful representation of a particular position, that has a negative impact on the trust that exists between the negotiating parties. And I think that you have to be very careful about that, and I learned that from my years in diplomacy, that you have to maintain trust at the same time as establishing a firm and unrelenting position. So that's where we're dealing with the problems that have been created by this threat to use military force, although he has removed that. Well, then, how can we trust what is said next? Well, that's what this team of negotiators from the State Department are trying to establish. And as they say, they are in the process of establishing a framework. They have not accomplished that yet. But the overarching relationship, the good relationship that we have with Denmark, will allow that discussion to take place.
So The storyline in Washington in some quarters is a little more cynical than that. It is that this is a way that the president distracts the public from other problems that he has. And given that we were at the height of debate around the Epstein files, given what's going on in the public about cost of living concerns, the fact that the president was elected saying that he was going to address cost of living, he was going to make sure the economy did well, and that he spent so much of his time overseas talking about global issues as opposed to what matters to people here at home, that this is really part of an effort to distract people from worrying about what they see every day in their own lives. And I think there's probably some truth in that.
Okay, you see me checking my phone throughout. I am checking for our online audiences to be sending us their questions. We'll turn it over to you all soon. Here in the room, you'll wait for the microphone. Got to make sure our online audiences can hear all that fun stuff. So I'm not checking the latest updates to the Super Bowl or the Olympics or whatever you're sporting.
But we're excited about that.
We're excited, yeah.
Or the U.S.-Danish negotiations.
That's what we're learning about that in real time. So I don't need to check on that because I've got my experts here with me. So my final question for you is the title of this is Greenland and the Future of the Transatlantic Alliance. So can you share just a few thoughts about where things seem to be headed and what the U.S. wants out of this and what the NATO allies want out of this?
Well, as I said, I think one positive aspect of this whole controversy has been a recognition on the part of our NATO allies and us as part of NATO that we've got to focus more on what's happening in the Arctic. As we all read, because climate change is affecting the ice melt in the Arctic, there are sea lanes open now that allow for access where we never had them in my lifetime anyway. And that has opened up a whole different issue around trade routes and commerce and what that means, but also around national security issues. And it's very, China identifies themselves as a near Arctic country. China's pretty far from the Arctic, if you've looked at the map. But it's a reflection of what China's doing everywhere in the world, which is trying to expand their areas of influence and their interests. And there is a very real threat, long-term, about how we deal with the Arctic. And so we do need to make sure that it's part of what we're paying attention to here in the United States. We do need to partner with not just our NATO allies, but with Greenland and see how we can work together. One of the things I'm going to do this afternoon is go to the New Boston Air Station, which is part of our Space Force. Some of the data that comes in from our Space Force station in Greenland comes in through New Boston. And as we're looking at what's happening in the high north, what's happening in terms of...
Can you just...
Oh, I'm sorry. As we're looking at what's happening in terms of threat concerns, in terms of information that's coming in, it is coming through Greenland, through that base, coming down through Canada. We're paying attention here at NORAD, where we partner with Canada, and we are getting some of that information right here in New Hampshire. We are a critical piece of those Space Force stations that processes that data. So it is an issue that we need to pay attention to, and hopefully this whole episode means that we will be better at that and recognize that we are going to be better if we're working with our allies and partners.
I would just like to add, the first trip that I took outside of Denmark when I was ambassador to Denmark was to the Tula Air Base, now Pacific. with my wife, and it was interesting as we were meeting with people there. One couple that we met was actually originally from New Hampshire, and I had served as their congressman when they were living in New Hampshire. So it's a small world in that regard, but I think the Greenland emerging once again as an important piece of property where important technologies are being implemented to be sure that we're being protected from incoming missiles is an important thing for us to be discussing at this time. And my hope and understanding, knowing the relationship, is that ultimately this is going to not only increase and improve the relationship between the United States and Denmark, but Jens Frederik Nielsen, the Prime Minister of Greenland, of a community of 57,000 people, is much more engaged than I've seen Greenland being engaged in the past. And this will give them a greater sense of security. This will give them a greater sense of belonging to that community. And I think that ultimately, if we have the right diplomats and the right people working on these issues, it will improve the relationships in the future. And I think that's going to be very important for NATO, because NATO, I think, is an absolutely necessary organization that has to be protected and kept in play, because it is what, in essence, is protecting us from the Russians expanding their influence and military engagement beyond their borders.
And I would agree with everything Dick said. I think the one thing that is critical to the people of Greenland is their own sovereignty, that they need to make these decisions for themselves, and that's important for us to respect that.
Okay. Well, thank you to both of you for indulging my questions. I guess I will turn it over to you all. I have plenty of other questions that I can ask, and we have several coming in online, so please do keep sending to Slido. Do we have any questions in the room to start? Yeah.
I do have a question, and I'm sure everyone.
Can you give us your name and your?
My name's Dan Barreto, and I train
Where you're
troops.
from?
Honolulu, Hawaii.
Ah.
I train troops in NATO in Europe, but a burning question I'm sure most of us have: is there any green on Greenland?
I can answer that. This is a great marketing ploy, and of course, the island that they didn't want people coming to, they called Iceland, and the one they figured, well, let everybody else go, is they called Greenland. And I actually have been to Greenland twice. I went once to visit the space installations. The other time I was there for the 1000th celebration of the introduction of Christianity to the island, and I went with the Queen of Denmark for that opportunity. That was in the year 2000. But I always chide my Danish friends with a little bit of an elbow in the ribs by saying that you folks are not really good at promotion, because you had Eric the Red over in Newfoundland in Canada 500 years before Columbus went to Hispaniola in the Caribbean, and yet the Italians were able to take credit for quote unquote discovering the Western Hemisphere first. So that's the kind of fun we have in the diplomatic circles.
But with the critical minerals, it may have people seeing green.
That's right. Yes, there you go.
Very good. But also, climate change really is having an impact on Greenland, and so there is more and more land that is now able to be used for growing. And
Don't you think, though, that this whole thing has kind of been employed by President Trump to kind of get ahead of the Russians and the Chinese, kind of sending a preemptive message, if you will? I don't think a military action was ever intended. Do you? I mean, I'm with NATO guys.
No,
all the time.
I don't think so, and I think that he and you've gotten sort of the extreme description of that position, that he could have done that to distract attention away from other things that are bothering the administration. But I think in any event, he did accomplish what he always wants to accomplish, and that is to control the news cycle. And so that's where I certainly can agree 100% with what Senator Shaheen has to say.
But listen, the concern is that this kind of action undermines the trust that we have with our allies. And the only people who benefit from that are our adversaries. So we shouldn't downplay how serious the potential fallout from this is. I mean, I can tell you that I meet with world leaders almost daily. And the Europeans and our allies are not over this. They are very worried about, can they trust us? And it's true of Canada. I mean, we're seeing in New Hampshire the fallout from the rhetoric around Canada, economically, in terms of visitors, in terms of the cooperation that we've had with Canada. So there are real ramifications that affect all of us. And we need to make sure that people who say, oh, well, that's just the president, that's what he always does, that they understand that there are implications for what he says that affect us.
And it'll take years to build back that trust that we once had.
Now, Senator, you kind of answered this question just now, but I think there's more to it. An anonymous person says, the president says or implies that the U.S. doesn't need NATO. If you disagree, what counter-argument do you think would resonate with the American public?
I actually think the American public understands how important NATO is. It's been the most successful military alliance in history. And there's a reason why the post-World War II order has produced for those countries in NATO and for the transatlantic alliance such prosperity. And it's because we have not had to worry about being attacked. I mean, there's a reason why Russia, in its war in Ukraine, keeps saying, well, Ukraine can't be part of NATO. We can't let Ukraine be part of NATO, because they understand how strong NATO is. And the addition of Finland and Sweden to NATO in the last couple of years has made it even stronger. So it is very critical to America's national security. And I referenced this earlier, but remember, Article 5 says an attack on any NATO country is an attack on every NATO country. And the only time Article 5 has been invoked was after 9/11, when the United States was attacked. And all of our NATO allies fought with us in Afghanistan.
And I would just add to that any time that Putin uses NATO as an excuse, saying that NATO is an offensive organization that is going to ultimately attack Russia is absolutely absurd. And I think that anyone who believes that is not dealing with reality as it exists. NATO is an alliance, a defensive alliance, and we need it because the aggressor is always Russia.
Mark.
I've never been to Greenland. Oh, sure. My name is Mark Manuel. I own a company in Amherst called Industrial Marketing. I've never been to Denmark or Greenland. My daughter's spent 4 weeks in the 4 Scandinavian countries. And you mentioned meeting the people there. And my understanding is they're very content people. They don't want to have the biggest cars. They don't need the biggest houses. They want security. They've got their health care. They've got a good way of life. And I see in this country, I think about the house that I grew up in and now the houses that most people own. Housing and workforce development are really tough for young people in this country to get ahead, which is why exporting is so important, tariffs, I mean, this whole discussion. I'm just curious if that's still the case, what you find when you talk to folks in Greenland and Denmark. I mean, sovereignty, obviously. I mean, who would ever want to live in Greenland? But they love it, right? So I'm just trying to help me understand that a little bit better.
Sure. Well, I will tell you, I'm in contact with my friends in Denmark on a monthly basis, and it has been much more than that of late, but for the reasons that we're here having this discussion. But the Danes are an incredibly wonderful people who have of course, back in history, 10% of them were Vikings, and they were the ones that sort of got the reputation. But the rest of them were agrarian farmers, and they have always been an agrarian society. The other thing that they do is they are merchants. They sail the oceans of the world. Maersk is the biggest shipping container operation in the world. That's it's a Danish company. But they are very good at bringing raw materials to Denmark and then converting them into beautiful furniture, beautiful technology. Bose is a Danish company in the acoustics and sound realm. So they do all of that extremely well. They also are a social welfare country, and so they take care of people's health care and other benefits to a very good extent. And as long as their economy is strong and chugging along at a high level, they can afford those kinds of benefits, and they can take care of their people in that way. One thing I'll say that's interesting is that Denmark is a Lutheran country. You are born into the Lutheran Church. And what is interesting, I found, is that the volunteer rate of people volunteering is not nearly as pronounced as it is in the state of New Hampshire, for example, because the state does so many things for the people. So their churches, although they are supported with a 3% tax, their churches are not attended with much regularity or with a large attendance. And so you are seeing the differences and the trade-offs that are made. But on the other hand, the Danes participate in elections 90%. New Hampshire is one of the best in this country, and we participated in this last election at 75%. So, they have a very strong commitment to community and to the things that are important as members of that community.
And I'll point out that I recently discovered, because of this event, that Echo, the fashion company, which is Danish, has their U.S. headquarters in Londonderry, New Hampshire. So there are actual connections between our state and Denmark.
And Novo Nordisk has a plant in West Lebanon, and one of the reasons when I was governor I took a trade mission to Denmark and Germany, and it wasn't just because Dick Swett was the ambassador, it was because, as Don Wivel knows, we had a lot of New Hampshire companies that wanted to do business with Denmark and vice versa. Denmark's actually the 16th largest investor in the United States. So despite their small size, they have a significant impact on business in the country. Can we get some of the students to ask questions back there?
Students, Sunny? Yeah.
Just introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Kylan Frankowicz. I'm a student at St. Anselm College, and I live and grew up in New London, New Hampshire.
What are you majoring in?
I'm majoring in politics. Hence, but you guys both talked about the idea of reconciliation between the U.S. and Denmark and our other allies. I was wondering what those conversations would look like and how that trust can be rebuilt more specifically.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we took the congressional delegation to Denmark and met with Greenland officials. It's one reason that there is a delegation in Greenland now to talk with officials. It's something that, as the ambassador pointed out, gets rebuilt over time. One of the things that I think
that's done by the ambassador playing tennis with the foreign minister and doing other things that aren't official-led delegations by our political leaders or governor.
But one of the positive things is that we also have military-to-military relationships with all of the NATO countries, with all of the countries that we are allies with. And we got a briefing from the commander of European Command, who is also the head of the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. And he pointed out that despite the concerns in the civilian population and among diplomatic officials, that the military-to-military relationship is very strong, and that continues. One of the things, though, I would say, Dick, about the ambassador's role, it is true that ambassadors are really important, and to have ambassadors on the ground is very important. And we do have a newly arrived ambassador in Denmark, but most of the posts in Europe do not currently have confirmed ambassadors because the president has not appointed them. And this is happening at a time when China has the biggest diplomatic presence around the world of any country, and they have expanded on this. So it's something that I've been talking about a lot in the Foreign Relations Committee, because we have a number of career ambassadors who are, Dick was not one of those. He had been a congressman and had a lot of other reasons why he was appointed, but we have a foreign service, a career foreign service, and those ambassadors usually go through without any trouble, and yet this administration has only nominated, and we've approved, I think, 7 career diplomats. Over 30 have been recalled from Europe in the last couple of months. So this is a huge problem that affects our relationships. It affects the ability of Americans in countries around the world to do business. When they get into trouble, they don't have an embassy that has an ambassador that they can go to. It is a real problem, and we should not condone it in this country.
And this goes back to the president's belief that he has to have people representing him, not the United States. And so he doesn't trust those 27 that he just recalled because they aren't representing him. And those 7 that he has approved are very close associates and have his trust, and so they've been pushed through.
Oh, hold on. Wait, sorry. Just for the online audience.
Isn't that typical of all administrations, though? I mean,
Not to this extent, no.
okay.
No, it absolutely is not.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, I'm Dawn Wivel. I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was formerly the International Trade Director for the state. My favorite governor was Governor Shaheen, and I organized the trade mission in Denmark when Dick Swett was the ambassador. It was amazing. We had like 50 companies on that trip. Anyway,
I think we did $80 million of contracts, too.
Yeah,
It was
and I
very
didn't even get a
significant.
commission. God.
Yes.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. Yeah, but I do want to say that no, absolutely not. And I can, well, I've never not spoken my mind, but even when I wasn't supposed to, as you know. But the effect, I can't stand it anymore. We're talking about. Thank you so much for pointing out the adverse effect on everything. I don't care if it's to deviate the news cycle or make it all about him. The effect is unbelievable. So I get calls every day from I do international trade. I have a consulting business from all over the world. What are you guys doing? What is going on? This is so scary. I mean, all over the world. I can tell you that my friends that work for the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service, the Department of Commerce, have a really hard time getting anybody to answer their calls anymore. It used to be that you would get the embassy to call for you if you wanted to sell a product in Denmark or wherever. They don't want to meet. The companies don't want to meet with them. I lost my biggest contract with the Canadians because they told me, and they won't say this publicly, we're not going to spend any money in the U.S. anymore. It's just unbelievable. So I think it's going to take us decades to recover from this. And, how dare he use the news cycle or whatever to his own benefit? It's literally ruining our relationships, ruining our, economic relationships, our diplomatic relationships. But I don't think people understand how incredibly scary this is. So thank you for pointing that out. And thank you I love it when you get mad like that.
Okay. Yeah, Father Jerome.
Thank you. Father Jerome Day from the Department of English and Communication here at St. Anselm. And I'm not sure that you would ever want to be a fly on the wall in the White House at the moment. but were you able to be in the presence of the key advisors of the president? Who or which people are the individuals who came up with this Danish particular proposal? It is the most cockamamie thing I have heard of in years. And I remember when it was first vetted back in 2019, as you said, Ambassador, saying, I don't like this at all because this is going to come back. He will not let this go. And indeed, he did not. There's that element of the question. The other question is to pick up on what a couple people have mentioned with regard to Canada. Canada is by far our most important, practically speaking, ally. And Mark Carney strikes me as very different from Justin Trudeau. I like Trudeau well enough, but Carney knows what he's doing. He knows finances inside, outside, and sideways. And he's done with the U.S., at least as it is acting under Donald Trump. And I think that's going to be a very hard sell, and that's a critical sell. And with that, there's another meteorological question that I have. How can there be a problem with the sea lanes? Because the president has told us that climate change and global warming is nonsense. It's cooked up by the Democrats and by the American press. So if you can untangle all of that, and here's one fourth element to this. And it's this. Let us imagine that you are the good guys, the Americans, and you want to be safe and so forth, and all of us over here, many of us are St. Anselm employees, and we're the bad guys. And we have our missiles, right? And we don't need to deal with these people here. Oh, they look a lot like Greenlandic people. So we're going to just toss them over at you. Now you're going to be more protected by having your bases on this table. And now they have become a target. So what right-minded Greenlander would want to put on top of his Viking horns, target, come and get me? So just figure that out if you could.
In less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, I may miss a couple of those
She is play-by-play,
questions.
I'm the color commentary.
Yeah. Oh, good. On the issue of Greenland as a target, you know, one of the interesting things to me in our conversations with the officials that we met with, the foreign minister, the prime minister, the parliamentarians, one of the things they all said was, we share the same values that the United States does. There is no reason for us to be adversarial because we all want the same things. So they are happy to stand with us against our adversaries, and they have a history of doing that. So I think that just goes to show how delusional this argument is on the part of the White House. And, you know, I have no idea who's telling Donald Trump what to do and what not to do. But I can tell you there are two, at least our understanding is there are two schools of thought among the administration officials. One is a more traditional approach to foreign policy. It may be a traditional Republican Party approach. And the other is this approach that seems to be winning out, that has the national security strategy that says our focus should be on this hemisphere and that does not acknowledge the threat from China and Russia and some of our other adversaries. I don't think it's clear yet who's going to ultimately win that argument.
Well, I'll spare you a moment.
He's not
to
on
think.
my side.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
The first thing I would say is we know that the president doesn't have a speechwriter who influences what he says. But with regard to your comment about Greenland being in the line of fire, that's what the 1951 agreement is all about. So we have had that, and Greenland has been in that position since day one, or since 1951. So I think, so I think from that perspective, you know, we are bound together at the hip. We're back to back in the foxhole. You can use whatever term you want to use. But with regard to who is influencing the president, I think he is one of the rare presidents who probably initiates his own thoughts into his own actions. I don't see, I don't see people influencing him. I don't see them putting the brakes on him. I think that he is an independent actor who doesn't consider even his own thoughts, let alone people's concerns about his thoughts as he goes pell-mell into some new topic.
Okay. To answer the question of who, Ronald Lauder, who is the heir to the Estee Lauder Cosmetics company, is credited, I don't know reported to have been the person to give Trump this idea. But looking at time, and I know the senator has a very busy schedule today, and to be respectful of everyone's time, I love all the questions. I really appreciate everybody being a part of this. But I want to turn it to first the ambassador and then Senator Shaheen with any final thoughts about something we might have missed, something critically important, or if you want, you can answer the online question of what can the people of New Hampshire do to better relations between Greenland, New Hampshire, Denmark?
Well, New Hampshire and Denmark have several similarities. One is scale. Denmark's 5.5 million people. New Hampshire's 1.5. But everybody knows everybody, and it's a very close-knit community here in New Hampshire between New Hampshire citizens and between Danes over in Denmark. I think that was one of the things that we tried to establish with our business mission when I was ambassador, was to introduce Denmark to New Hampshire as a back door into the U.S. greater economy. That was a big part of our discussions as we tried to decide how we put this mission together. And I think that New Hampshire also shares a lot with Denmark in the fact that New Hampshireites are modest to a certain extent, and Danes are modest to a certain extent, and I like to joke with both my New Hampshire neighbors and my Danish friends that modesty is a little bit of a false modesty, because we don't wear our accomplishments on our sleeves, because you should already realize how good we are. And that is a very common feeling between Danes and New Hampshireites. So I think New Hampshire has a very unique position and could play an important role in maintaining and re-establishing a relationship that is going through difficult times right now. But beyond that, I think it will take not decades, it'll take years for us to rebuild the trust. And the only way that will be done is by action. It is by putting ourselves together with the Danes and showing them that they mean a great deal to us and that we care a great deal about them. And I think only through those actions will we ultimately have the ability to regain their confidence.
Now, one of the women I met when we were in Copenhagen she was a dual citizen. Her husband was Danish, and she was from Massachusetts, actually. And she said, I have 4 sons. In Denmark, conscription is required for all young people. She said, I'm very worried that my oldest son who is a dual citizen, Danish and American, is going to wind up having to go to war against the United States. I tell that story because I think that speaks to the level of impact that this is having on the people of Denmark. I do think we are going to continue to rebuild that trust and work on that. But, what can people do? One of the things, I don't know who the president listens to, but I know he looks at the polls. And he alters his action based on what he sees in the polls. And what we need to do is to let the people who represent us know what our positions are.
And the stock market.
Yes, and he listens to the stock market. And when I talk to people who say, well, what can I do about this or that? I say, well, talk to the federal delegation, because we're the people in Washington. But we're all in agreement. So call the governor's office, call your local legislator, call your state senator, call your local official, and tell them. Because this is a country where it doesn't just matter what happens at the top down, it also matters what happens at the bottom. And the grassroots makes a huge difference. And that's one of the responsibilities all of us have as citizens, is to engage with what's happening in the government. And if we don't like it, then we need to speak up. If we like it, we should also speak up.
And I just want to say thank you to everybody here. It is a marvelous group, wonderful questions, and this is the kind of civic engagement that we need to see everywhere, as the senator
Amen.
just talked about. This is what saves this country, let alone Denmark as well.
Thank you all.
Although I do have to say, she missed one key important point. And you're all doing it already, which is to come and join the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire, support this work, and come and be a part of the conversation, because the conversations are what can lead you to an informed decision. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Thank you to Senator Shaheen, Ambassador Swett, for their time, their insights. I really appreciate having this conversation. I hope we don't have to have it again, because this issue is past us and the work to rebuild relationships begins today. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.